Welcome back to Her Path, the podcast for busy women looking for health, happiness, and purpose. We are talking about grit today. And grit is I find it so fascinating. Like where it comes from. How do we get it? How do we harness it? Why is it so important today? Why is it especially important for women? So to start off, of course, I had to go to the dictionary and look it up. So grit is defined as the courage to resolve and strength of character. And when I read that, I immediately started thinking about my clients. So I have several examples, but I want to share just a couple of them. So I have one client who has just moved into a new phase of her life, and she has endured significant hardships in her childhood, in her adulthood. And after all that she's been through, she's moved into this new space, like a new physical space, a new mental space, a new everything. She has freedom, she has possibilities. But with that comes so much fear and anxiety that's coming through from all of the trauma that she's experienced over the years. And as we've been working together, I have just been amazed at how she shows up and she shows me her grit when she is defending who she can be, even though people have kept her down her whole life. And I think we talked about that in an earlier podcast about being heard, right? That people will keep you down and don't want your voice to be heard. But she is showing me grit as she defends the love of her work, her resolve to rise above all of that negativity, all of that past trauma, and to go after her dreams in a really powerful and yet self-loving way. And it feels to me like her grit propels her forward. I have another client who's very, very different. She's in a very high professional position. She's a physician, and I have seen her grit show up in her absolutely relentless pursuit of her passions, of her beliefs. She has been defending herself and her role. She's been negotiating what she believes to be right. She's defending her right to fair pay for positions that she holds. And she's defending her vision for equality in her field, in every encounter. And there have been so many. It's amazing to me the way she stays focused on doing good. She's advocating for herself because she's leading as an example for all the other women coming up behind her and around her. So she's staying focused. She's doing good for others. She's leading by example, and she's keeping her emotions out of these pursuits. And that's been just the coolest thing to watch, because how many of us get so, when we're defending things we're so passionate about, like for me, like I have no control over the tears. When they're going to come, they're just going to come. But she has managed her emotions just beautifully. And I believe it's because of her grit. So before I go forward, I would love to hear your stories of grit, either your own or your clients or your patients or people that you know.
I wanted to touch back on one of the things that you had mentioned about, you were talking about describing your client. And I think the key word that you described there was love. And I think in order to have, or to really kind of master grit, is to really have a love of something. And I think self-love, I think, was what you used for, one of your patients that had self-love for herself. Having that self-love for yourself, I think, really feeds into that grit that allows you to advocate for yourself, be resilient in the face of, failure and adversity. or really love for others will really feed that grit in your advocating for others as well, despite how overwhelming or insurmountable the obstacles may seem. I think that concept of love is what will really drive that grit and feel and feed it,
Yep.
and fuel it to be able to continue to attempt to succeed despite all of the people situations that may get in the way.
Yep.
So I really loved how you mentioned your clients and in the sense of having that self-love and that presenting itself as grit.
Yeah. Yeah. And self-worth, right? The first
Right.
client, yeah, she's treating herself with all the self-love that she has to overcome her past traumas. The second client, she has the self-love, but she also has the self-worth, right? So it's
Mhm.
like taking that self-love to the next level,
Right.
which is just amazing to see. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
How about you,
amazing.
Nancy?
Well, I have a woman, just she lives down the road from me, and I go over a couple days a week, and I say I take care of her, but I really hang out with her. She's 97, and she's about 5 foot and weighs less than 100 pounds. But she's got grit, man. She gets out and we walk 2 miles every day with her walker down the road, and she's had a stroke, and so her words don't come really well, but every
Mhm.
once in a while she'll say, "I'm tough." So I think it's a belief. She grew up with three brothers. And I think it's just a belief ingrained in her that she's tough. Her husband died 4 months ago, but she just keeps going. She'll be up all night. She won't sleep, but yet in the daytime she still has to walk those 2 miles, and we lift weights. She's amazing.
She's
Just
like
has
your
so much.
personal trainer, Nancy.
I would say she's got grit. She's
Yeah.
97. She's a little peanut.
And I love that doing the things, even though you don't want to, that I think goes right along with what grit is. And the reason why one would do those things, even though you don't want to, is because it's worth it. It's worth it either for yourself, the long-term benefits, or for someone else who may be depending on you.
Right.
That shows a lot of grit, doing those hard things or those uncomfortable things, unpleasant things, even though there's this innate kind of like inertia to not want to do the hard things.
Yes.
And that includes speaking out against injustice towards yourself or someone else. That is like an extreme example, but it can also be something simple like following your meal plan or making a meal plan for yourself, following your meal plan. I hate lifting weights, but it's important to me because I want to be strong. And so following through with the plan to go and do, that workout for that day, that follow through is where the grit is, even though you
Yes.
don't want to do it.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Born with, or can you develop it, do you think?
I think you can develop it, but I think it's painful to develop it. And you have to get beat up quite a bit and make the decision where, getting beat up, whether it's whatever way you can determine what does beat up mean for you in life. It could be beat up at work. It could be beat up in your body. It could be, beat up,
In your mind.
socially, in your mind. But, there comes a point where sometimes you acknowledge, you know what, this isn't working for me. This isn't working. This isn't good. And those small changes over time, I think you can develop that grit with those small changes that are realistic to start off with. And those small little changes, whether it's in the way that you think, in the way that you follow through with a plan, in the way that you react to something, over time, those small changes can be huge. And then there's where you get your grit.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you asked that question, Nancy. So when I look across all of my clients and I look at their grit, there were some commonalities that I think all can be learned. So the first one is core beliefs and values. You know, they're showing their grit from their passion, and their passion is all based on their core beliefs and values, right? It's knowing what drives you, what lights that fire, what gives you courage. And that's the foundation for grit. I also think developing that inner strength. Once you know your core beliefs and that passion and that thing that's worth fighting for, this inner strength develops, right? And that leads to your conviction. It channels your passion a little bit better. And it also leads to that resilience. And I think you brought that up, Gabby, about having resilience to keep at it over. And that's the thing, is that I'm watching people just never say die, never say never, right? Just keep going, no matter how many doors, slam in their face. There's going to be an open door at some point. I think then fearlessness and courage. Those are what allows you to do the scary things and to take on the new challenges, to take on the new risks, or do the thing that scares you, but the thing that you believe in, right? And I've seen, if we think of the two examples that I gave, both women took on scary, scary things, but it was because they believed in it so much, right? That they developed that fearlessness about it.
I think there's also a tenacity that goes along with the grit, that not giving up.
Yes.
And being able to regroup from something that's not working and trying a different way of tackling the situation.
Yeah.
I think that's something that is so easy for us to do. And it's natural, right? To avoid anything that is challenging, difficult, causes, pain or some type of perceived suffering, is to just stop, just give up. But that ability to keep at it and not give up, I think that's essential for a lot of women in, really achieving those goals that are worthwhile.
Perseverance, right?
Perseverance, yeah, or trying it
Yeah.
in a different way to see if that will be more successful, instead of doing the same thing over and over and not getting any results in those actions.
Yeah.
Because there could be, I think there is a difference between, maybe not that big of a difference. I guess the results would be the difference, but in like a stubbornness versus a resilience. There is a persistence that goes along with both of those, but I think, the results are what really speaks for the positive aspects in not giving up on something, or working towards something that is worth it.
When we're talking about grit, I like the word stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
I like the word, right? Usually we don't
There
like
is
that.
a level of stubbornness to it, right? And it could be,
have to.
it could be positive or negative. I mean, but it just depends on how you perceive it or how you look at it.
Right.
Do you ever think it can be detrimental? Grit?
I think it depends on how, on the individual, but I see it mostly as a positive thing, for the person. If it's something that goes along, like what you were saying, at least with your core values, something that you really believe in, something that you feel is very passionate about, then for you, there isn't a negative in it, other than it may be challenging, it may be hard, it may be something uncomfortable that you need to overcome. But that's where the growth happens, right? That's where like the magic and the success comes in, is in having those experiences really, kind of transform you into a different person.
Right. Nancy, what are your thoughts on how you see how you see grit and where it comes from or how it develops.
Well, I think it can develop many ways. Like in childhood, if you're pushed down a lot, I think it can like surface that way. I think role models have a lot to do with it as well. You know, I think about that book. What was it by David Goggins? Have you ever listened to him or heard anything from him?
Mhm.
He's somebody who was like, I don't know the whole story, but just he was like fat and overweight. Didn't have a very good upbringing, but like through pure determination, he really got in shape, and he runs. And in fact, he runs and his like knees are bone on bone, but he runs a lot. So I think
Mm.
it can be a little bit detrimental. But you know, it's a good quality to have for sure. I think it can come from positive and negative experiences. But I think it's all about how you use your experiences.
Yeah.
I think I remember reading a study, and this was in an adolescent psychology or an adolescent development class I took a long time ago, that, you know, what was the biggest thing that will determine whether, you know, children will be positively or negatively influenced. Obviously, peers, you know, play a big role in that. But the biggest factor was having just one positive influence, you know, in your life to serve as kind of like a guiding light or a role model that was sufficient to be a protective factor in being able to have resilience or being able to overcome, you know, negative circumstances, poverty, you know, violence, um, being surrounded by, you know, drugs or alcohol or, you know, negative peers. Was having that one positive influence in your life was a big determinant of whether or not that teen had a, you know, positive outcome. And so, yeah, that grit can be, you know, modeled, I guess you can put it that way.
Mhm.
And I think people going through cancer for sure have grit. You know, I knew a woman, she was given a really horrible diagnosis, and her friend slash coach said, okay, you've got to go out and buy 3 new pair of shoes. She was like, what? I'm not going to be around to wear the shoes. She did. She went out and bought them reluctantly, and she wore them, and she's still going today. She's still going strong. That one psychological twist kind of really helped her a lot. Really helped her get the grit to push forward and to end
Yeah.
up living.
I guess that would be purpose, right? Having a purpose,
Yeah.
having a distinct set, kind of clear idea of what your purpose is
Mhm.
Right.
can help
Drive.
you move forward and give you that drive.
Yep. That's an amazing story.
Not funny? Yeah, she had to live to wear the shoes, but she didn't want to spend money.
All right. We all need to go buy 3 more pairs of shoes. Tell our
Easy,
husbands.
done.
Yes, done.
No problem.
Any other final thoughts on grit, ladies?
I think the key thing that I gathered from you guys today is having that, you know, self-love, that self-worth, and that stubbornness, I think combined are key in being able to kind of fuel that grit, that, you know, persevering despite all the obstacles, not giving up, regardless of how overwhelming, you know, advocating for yourself and for others. And so it takes a lot of self-love and fearlessness to, I think, develop that self-grip or to have it.
Yes, I agree. I
Love
agree.
yourself enough to be gritty.
Right. Love yourself enough to be gritty. That's the final word on grit. That nothing better than that. Thank you everyone for chiming in today. If this was a valuable conversation for you, we would love for you to like and subscribe and share our podcast with others. That would mean a lot to us. And until next time, be well and be gritty.
Hey, one more thing before we leave. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We are certified professional coaches, but this broadcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice. Okay, thanks for listening. See you next week.